Hello, so this is going to be a video on polearms again, and sort of what would be the ideal length for one for sort of self-defense use or protection use rather than actually, use in a battlefield type scenario. Now, I'm just sort of thinking of any sort of general, sort of without rule of law scenario or anything like that for this sort of one. So what I have here is the really good bill hook head Richard Weaponsmith did me, on top of, a pole. That I just mounted it on, which is like a standard, I think, rake handle or something like that. So it comes to just over 6 foot, this pole arm, because I think it's about 5 foot something for the pole. Then obviously when you've got the big spike on it, it comes to probably just over 6 foot. So this is where it's actually quite a good length, because obviously the issue is, for a battlefield pole arm, you probably want them to be about 8 foot or whatever. And pikes are even longer than that, obviously, but the issue was that if you had it as a battlefield weapon, you're normally in big open fields. If you wanted something for just a general protection use for yourself, you wouldn't want it to be that big, because obviously you have to carry it around probably indoors and outdoors. So I don't think you'd want it any taller than this one. The halberd I've got is 8 foot, and that's definitely far too big and clumsy to ever think about using indoors. But this one you could probably just about manage with. Now, the door behind me is closed for an obvious reason, so I can't actually extend the pole any further where I'm standing. So that's as far back as I can get it, but I could still thrust fairly effectively here. Obviously I don't want to murder the camera, which is why I'm not thrusting with as much weight, but as you can see there, you can move it forwards. Now the brilliant thing with obviously pole arms is you can grip them wherever you want to grip them. Now you are going to be restricted, of course, by the amount of pole behind you, if there is an object directly behind you. But what I mean with that, obviously, is that you can move your hands up and down the shaft as you require for where you want to get the grip or point of balance. So when you thrust one, normally you would obviously move your hands along it as you thrust, which is probably out of frame, me doing this, but you can see basically I'm doing this with the pole to actually manoeuvre how much of it I let forwards or back. So the pole arm obviously has its main point, which is how it's going to do its damage, but this being a bill hook, it has the sort of axe kind of like cleaver bit there, and it's got the reverse spike as well. So this is actually more versatile, I imagine, in close quarters than as just a typical spear would be, because a spear is obviously going to restrict you to only having a stabbing point. And it could be something like a wing spear that has the blades on either side of it. But, you know, something like this is going to be a lot more versatile, I should think, in terms of actually offering, you know, a bit more sort of versatility. So with this, obviously you could probably grip the bill hook right near the top and then bring it forwards like that if needed. Obviously you're going to have to watch the pole actually hitting you in the legs, but you can probably... I've just hit myself in the leg, and that was quite painful, but you know, you can probably do that. Similarly, you could use the other side with the spike, but I think primarily, obviously, thrusting. As you can see, if you hold your arm kind of chicken wing up, you can use this in very close sort of range in front of you, if you needed to use it like that. Now, a big advantage, of course, is despite the clumsiness of the pole, you have actually at least got some weight behind everything. And you've got reach if you need it. Now, what I mean by that obviously is, if you've got something like a sword, the sword is pretty much the same length or whatever. I know you can do things like half swording, but you're obviously going to get far, far more reach with a pole arm than you are a sword. So if you were in a more open environment, then you can obviously use the full size of it. Now, it's very easy with a pole arm to actually thrust and then move backwards again. So to do that, then move back. You know, and obviously you can thrust up and down quite easily with a pole arm, and you can obviously waggle it around. Makes it harder for whoever's coming at you to know exactly where you're going to thrust it next, which is one of the main advantages with them, because there's a good Lindy Page and sort of Scholar Gladiatora video where they actually talk about how for most people spears are better than swords, simply because if you've not got much experience with either, you can give most people a pole arm like a simple spear. And they demonstrated that in a video where they can actually, you know, hit more often with them than if they're using a sword. Because obviously thrusting with a spear is quite straightforward and you've got a reach advantage. Now, they don't actually work as well with shields, funnily enough, spears, because if you've got a shield in one hand, you suddenly have a much clumsier, you know, lethargic kind of thrusting with only one hand. whereas if you've got a polearm with both hands, you can thrust a lot easier. So I actually think, going back to like the topic of the video, for protecting yourself in a scenario, like obviously if you're in somewhere like America where there's firearms, then that's a completely invalid point, you'd have a firearm, but I think if it was coming down to melee weapons, in some sort of outdoor, especially outdoor survival scenario where you might have to kill big game with it, something like a polearm is going to be very effective, because obviously you can hunt boar with spear and stuff like that. That actually works. So a big polearm would also do the exact same job, and obviously you've got a bit more versatility of this. Now, because bill hooks used to be agricultural weapons, or agricultural tools I should say, you've still got that agricultural sort of bit of this where you could prune branches and things using it. So the point of this video, pardon the pun, which is actually out of the frame, is basically, I think, obviously discussed in the comments, but I think an actual polearm like this would be very good in a scenario if you had to pick, you know, where people typically say, oh, I'd carry a machete or I'd carry an axe. I think a polearm like this would actually be very good, because you could obviously tailor the poles the exact height you wanted it, longer or shorter. I think this is an ideal height for my bill hook, but you know, I could take another ½ foot off the pole and I think I'd still be very happy with this. But you know, that's the sort of thing. But at least with this height you can actually carry it over your shoulder, say, like this, and have no issue. Where if you're actually got a bigger polearm, like I've said before with the halberd, it's really awkward to move through the house. Especially because if you stand it upright in most rooms, it's only about less than an inch short of hitting the ceiling all the time. So you actually have a lot of difficulty in moving it around, you know, through doorways. You have to keep essentially walking it through very slowly, where at least with this you could actually, you know, either lead it through slightly like that, or you could, you know, obviously carry it this way round, hook over your shoulder, and then, you know, you've got that and it's not going to get in the way very much. So, yeah, I think a bill hook would actually be a surprisingly good, you know, weapon or tool, and also other similar polearms as well for, sort of, you know, some sort of without rule of law situation. The other thing as well of these is I think they'd work quite well, as we say before, in any sort of zombie or whatever thing, because a big polearm like this certainly would have the power to destroy a zombie's brain without much issue. You know, especially with all the different tools on a polearm. But yeah, I do think a bill hook or a similar kind of, you know, shorter halberd or whatever, you know, I'd say no more than 6 foot from bottom to top, would actually be surprisingly good in a lot of these scenarios because of the versatility of it.